Today, we're going to be speaking with Taylor Lorenz, who's the author of the book Extremely Online: The Untold Story of Fame, Influence, and Power on the Internet. Taylor, so great having you on. I can't believe you've never been on before, but this is a good opportunity to do it.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
So, when I think about being extremely online, I think about someone who is so connected to what's happening on social media, Reddit, Twitter, etc., that they sometimes lose the connection with what's happening in the quote real world. And in the political space, what I think about is if you just looked on Reddit and Twitter in 2020, you would have thought, for example, like Bernie Sanders will easily win the Democratic primary. It turned out a lot of the people that vote in the Democratic primary are just working and they're not spending time on these social platforms, and that there was much more support among Democrats for Joe Biden than it seemed from the internet. Talk about if that relates to what you mean by extremely online and kind of the focus of the book.
Yeah, it's definitely a phenomenon. I think social media can be a great sort of signal, but it's definitely not representative of everything, especially not one platform. My book, I named it Extremely Online because it's really about sort of how all of us have become increasingly online, not even necessarily extremely online in the way that a lot of people use it, as you just described, but also just like our lives are increasingly mediated by the internet, our economic system, our political system, like all of these things are shaped by the internet. I know Joe Biden's not a big internet user, but actually his entire digital team was just at VidCon last week talking about how
Right.
he's the biggest content creator there is on, in political world right now. So, online content is really key, and we all live in this world shaped by the internet.
It seems as though, like with any technology, and Neil Postman and other technology theorists have written about this over time, there are things that we might say are, quote, good for society to the extent that we can come up with such a list. And then there are things that are maybe not so good that result from new technology. If we talk about some of the good, I guess, with the world that you describe in the book, we would talk about rapid and more fluid communication, ability to learn about things that are taking place physically far from where we are, created all sorts of new industries and jobs, although anytime that happens, maybe some are destroyed. We can kind of come up with this category of things that are good. And then you've got maybe on the other side of the ledger, the things that are not so good. From your perspective, what is at the top of the not so good list, if that makes sense?
Oh my God. Yeah, that's hard to choose from. I mean, as a journalist, I have to say a lot of disinformation worries me. I think um, there's no media literacy in this country at all, but especially on the internet. I know there was some study that came out recently that said teenagers on TikTok are actually more likely to fall for scams and misinformation than their boomer, grandparents or whatever on Facebook. So I think that worries me the most. The second aspect, and I write a lot about this in the book, is the mental health toll that it has on people, because I think, again, even just using it at a young age, I think it can really affect you, but it affects all of us. It can be toxic. I don't think the internet is inherently bad, but I think our current platform ecosystem is really exploitative and bad.
Yeah, on a recent podcast, Cal Newport, who writes a lot about this stuff, said this is a prediction, right? So it could be wrong, but he expects that in 10 years, the idea of giving a 12-year-old uncontrolled access to social media would be sort of like we would now say, oh, we give them cigarettes like he believes the data is going to ultimately be so overwhelming on the side of this is very bad that it will seem that destructive to provide young people with the sort of access that many have. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't know if I totally agree with that, because I think that social media and the internet can be a real lifeline, especially for like LGBTQ youth and other, kids that grow up in environments that maybe aren't very supportive of their identity or gender, things like that. It can be good. I think unfettered access to the internet at such a young age is not good, right? It's just the same way we wouldn't put our kid out on the streets of New York City and say, go explore for a couple hours, right? Like you need to provide sort of guidelines and safe experiences. And I think it's really good to teach kids to use the internet in positive ways, YouTube tutorials, teach yourself skills, right? But also teach them a very strong sense of identity early, so that they don't sort of let their identity be defined by the internet.
This all kind of gets us into another major topic of your book, which relates to influencer culture, content creators, sort of like the space in which I and many of my colleagues exist, many different content areas, of course. Talk a little bit about how the platforms led to this even being possible, in the sense that MySpace, for all its successes and failures, did not really foment the influencer content creation culture that we see today. So in some sense, it was different, even though it was a precursor. What is it about the platforms that are prevalent now that have led to this influencer culture?
Yeah, I actually talk about MySpace in the book, that beginning, and sort of, I think it was just way too early. Like, they wanted people to add and discover, and at that time it wasn't even normal to add your real life friends on social media. So it was kind of not much of a thing. I talk about actually the rise of blogs and blog culture, which I think is actually very similar to kind of like podcast culture today, where you have these people that are generating ideas or thoughts around a specific topic, and you have sort of people returning to learn or listen, or just some of them are highly personal, some of them are highly educational. I think that was the real beginning of influencer culture. It started with bloggers, actually. And then, of course, it's evolved onto platforms like YouTube. YouTube was so early. I mean, they rolled out monetization in 2007.
Right.
Facebook still doesn't have a coherent monetization model for creators. So, yeah, but I think as these platforms grew, online attention became this valuable currency, and people started to be able to monetize in more ways on the internet. I talk in the book as well about this explosion in e-commerce sites that allow people to easily generate merch and, websites and things like this. So we just have a lot more tools at our disposal now.
Yeah, the platform monetization thing is interesting. There are platforms now. I don't know how it's going to shake out ultimately, but for example, TikTok launched, they've had their creator fund for a while, but they launched what's called the Creativity Fund beta. And I'm part of it. And the first month it sort of did okay. And it's essentially dead as of October 2023, in the sense that like the revenue we had is down like 98%. I don't know if it's because they actually have changed their mind or because it's a pool-based revenue source. So now it's getting split up among more people. When these things happen, it very quickly changes the dynamics of the content that's being created, because creators adjust to create content that meets the guidelines. And then just as quickly, when the funding dries up, creators change again. It seems that this is not an uncommon story. Adpocalypse on YouTube. We've had periods on Facebook where we lose all revenue for a month because I debunk some misinformation, but it's flagged as misinformation, etc.
Yeah, I have almost a whole chapter on the adpocalypse in my book, and the sort of the what that led to and why it happened. I think that this inherent tension between content creators and platforms. And platforms like TikTok and Instagram, in an extent too, with Reels, it's like they haven't really cracked short form monetization yet.
Right.
And I think that they're still struggling. They don't have that sort of just a tried and true monetization model that YouTube has, honestly. And I think that makes it really precarious for content creators. So you see a lot of people use TikTok for discovery and for audience growth. And then they immediately try and funnel people to their Patreon or YouTube or something more sustainable, because you just can't. It's like building a business on quicksand if you try.
This has been my experience. I mean, I have been on TikTok a fraction of as long as I've been on YouTube. I get recognized just as much by people who say I watch you on TikTok as YouTube, which might give one the impression that it's just as significant of a platform to our revenue. It's not. It makes almost zero, but the combination of, I think, its addictiveness, as well as the time spent on the platform, and just an insanely good recommendation algorithm, which we could say is a great thing and also a really dangerous thing. It just seems as though the growth and time on app has to be off the charts for TikTok.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's far surpassed Instagram, Facebook, everything else. I mean, they talk about themselves as a Netflix competitor, because they really want people to be on there binging basically TikTok for hours. And I think people are. I mean, it's a highly addictive app, and I literally was on it until 1 a.m. last night. But it's also an app that you're not pressured to follow. It's not a follow-based social media app. It's all algorithmic content. The content is all algorithmically delivered. So that, I think, is also kind of hard for creators to wrap their head around, because you could have followers on there, but it's really about getting distribution in the feed. And that is just inherently so volatile.
So in general, if we zoom out on the influencer and content creation thing, it seems to me that the most positive spin we can put on it is that it has democratized content creation. It has lowered barriers to entry where you now don't need to get hired by 3 different levels of bosses at CBS in order to be able to get your opinion out there. And because many of these platforms are algorithmically driven, if you just create pieces of content that people are interested in, you're going to build a large audience. And that all sounds great. On the other side of it, as you talked about, there's the misinformation, disinformation side of it. There's creators who quickly grow and aren't prepared for the mental health implications of starting to see horrifying comments of all different kinds and, kill yourself and anti-Semitic stuff and stuff like this. What are the kind of 2 sides to this democratization of content creation?
Yeah, as you mentioned, it's been really liberatory in so many ways, especially for people. I mean, I started as a blogger. I have no background in traditional media. I would have never gotten a job in traditional media had I tried.
Right.
Now I do solely because of my internet presence, basically my work, but leveraging the internet. I think what's really worrying is especially how right-wing creators have become very adept at manipulating this this media ecosystem, especially to generate outrage around sort of manufactured news stories. I mean, I've obviously have covered the account libs of TikTok and others like Matt Walsh and the Daily Wire, content creators, and they're just very good at covering the news in a sort of this hyper specific way that generates outrage, which generates revenue. And it's just this flywheel for them. And I think that's increasingly like large swaths of the content creator ecosystem are these people pushing misinformation for profit. And that's a huge problem.
Right. So this to me seems analogous to, one of the reasons local news is what it is, which is you've got 30 minutes, you take away the commercials, you have 21 minutes left.
Yeah.
7 minutes goes to weather, multiple weather reports. You've got 14 minutes left. The 14 is basically half stories that came from a network that are pre-produced because they're really cheap. And then the other half is often like some kind of crime or something like that, sort of like if it bleeds, it leads. Okay, so that's like how that format and the financial incentives lead to the way local news looks. Online, it's logical to me that if I do a general story about the number of people that lack healthcare, it's not the type of story that's going to get a lot of attention. It doesn't have a clear beginning, middle, and end. It's generally upsetting, but it's not a particular person did a thing. Mm-hmm. If you talk about litter boxes in a bathroom, it's about which principal put that in there. Which parents are okay with their kids saying, I'm a cat, so I'm going to use a litter box, or whatever the case may be. It seems like a natural fit for the way these algorithms work.
Yeah, which by the way, Tyler Kincaid at NBC did a great debunking about how there was absolutely no truth. And the litter boxes at that one school were because of school shootings in case kids had to go to the bathroom during school shootings. So
right. Oh, of course. Yeah.
Very dark.
Completely dark and horrible thing. Yeah.
But anyway.
But so it seems we're only going to see more of that to the extent that this is the way the platforms work.
100% these platforms incentivize exactly that behavior and exactly that content. And I think that's a huge problem. And I think a huge issue that I wish that we had more sort of attention and accountability on. I think we often have a lot of accountability on the platforms of like, oh, you're sharing, like fake news links in Facebook or something. People generally ignore the content creator world. If it ever gets covered, it's usually through like an entertainment lens,
Right.
Political reporters just fundamentally do not care about or understand our current media landscape, which is really terrifying, because they're very unprepared. And we see political figures leverage these content creators. Obviously Trump in a huge way, but also DeSantis, Matt Gaetz, a lot of sort of far right political figures have just become sort of very tightly wound with that community online.
I want to zoom out a little bit from the content creation around politics because I'm familiar with it and my audience is, but you talk about other areas in the book as well. Mm-hmm. To pick something, mommy bloggers. Talk a little bit for people who may not follow mommy bloggers. How did mommy bloggers sort of completely upend the online discussion about motherhood altogether? Because it's been a major change with these platforms.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think mommy bloggers were some of the OG influencer content creators. These were Gen X mothers in the early 2000s who were really didn't feel like traditional women's media spoke to their version of motherhood at all, basically. It was really misogynistic, it was very patriarchal. And so they turned to the internet. This was in the early aughts, and they started blogging, often extremely candidly about their life. And they attracted audiences of millions. They started monetizing. They built, in some cases, huge media brands. And they really changed women's media. Like they really pushed the traditional media, which had always like sort of stigmatized things like postpartum depression or struggling to breastfeed or like hating your husband sometimes. Like these were all things that the mommy bloggers were discussing openly and candidly. And so the traditional media was forced to kind of react and be like, okay, moms are a little bit more complex. And I want to be clear too, a lot of these mom bloggers, you know, I think moms get a lot of hatred online or they're accused of exploiting their kids or whatever. A lot of these blogs didn't even have photos. This was the early aughts. Like a lot of them were pseudonymous. They used pseudonyms for their children. You didn't actually know very much about their lives. You just knew a lot about sort of their inner lives. So they were just really, it was a really incredible kind of time where it seemed like the internet would maybe be used for good. And then of course things got very warped. But yeah, they really pioneered this whole ecosystem, and the revenue pathways that they built and systems that they built for monetization. I mean, content creators still rely on today.
What are a couple other areas, sort of like mommy bloggers, that may be less known to my audience, but that have been significant in the entire ecosystem?
Yeah, I talk about this in my book too, is the beauty vlogger revolution in the early 2010s. You had these beauty vloggers on YouTube like Michelle Phan, Ingrid Nielsen, these women that also felt like the traditional makeup industry wasn't serving women of color and just like, and basically anyone without a very specific skin tone and kind of aesthetic. And so they started to build these huge audiences and launched huge product lines and makeup lines and started to build products. I mean, Kylie Lip Kit is sort of the most famous influencer makeup line, but Michelle Phan was doing it before Kylie. And it really transformed the beauty industry, like upended it. And I just think it's really interesting. I think a lot of this stuff people think of as more recent phenomenon, or they think, oh, it started with Mr. Beast or David Dobrik, but it was really built by women. It was like fashion and beauty were areas that the content creator ecosystem like sort of adopted very early. So yeah, there were a lot of pioneers, but a lot of those same women were driven off the internet. I mean, almost none of these women are still around on the internet because they dealt with so much misogynistic hate.
Right. That is, I guess that kind of segues me into the last thing I wanted to ask you about, which is, are you getting a lot less hate since Tucker was fired from Fox?
Yes. I was actually thinking about that recently. His fans have been real quiet, and he is tanking on Twitter. Like he's not getting the views. I mean, Elon Musk has just made up numbers for views now, but
yeah, it seems that if you inadvertently scroll by the video, it's a view.
David, I made a private account with no followers, and I tweeted a tweet with no followers on a locked account. It said it had 700 views.
That's very strange. That's suspicious to me.
Made up. It's just nonsense. Yeah. Somebody said it's like every time there's an API call on the page or some like weird, it's nonsense. And yeah, I think it's also like it made very clear how much Tucker was relying on producers, because that show is not good.
Rough. It's a shaky show, I think is the way I would put it. Yeah. Listen, the book is extremely online, The Untold Story of Fame, Influence, and Power on the Internet. We've been speaking with the book's author, Taylor Lorenz. Taylor, really appreciate your time and insights today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.